Smoke curled like a serpent into the sky above pine barrens. Helicopters thudded overhead, the kind of sound that rattled more than the windows. People were running, some clutching pets, others dragging plastic bins of whatever they could grab in 5 minutes or less. Sirens wailed from all directions. Fire had no manners. It didn't knock before bursting in. And yet, amid the chaos, a soft electronic ping echoed inside an old utility shed behind a half-collapsed barn. A blinking light. A signal. Malik Thompson's homemade fire alert system, assembled from salvaged microwave parts, solar panels, and more hope than logic, had come to life. And it wasn't wrong. It was never wrong. Earlier that morning, no one had listened. The town's emergency systems had glitched. Cell towers were jammed. Radios silent. But Malik's sensor nodes, hidden in the pine trees for years, had whispered to each other. They knew. They had seen it coming. Now, as flames licked closer to the edge of town, that same, crazy idea, they'd all laughed at was the only thing that still worked. Let's rewind. A few years ago, if you'd driven through Briar Ridge, New Jersey, you probably wouldn't have noticed the Thompson farm. It was the kind of place you only spotted if your GPS made a mistake. A weathered white fence, fields that hadn't grown much since the drought 5 summers ago, and a barn that leaned like it had secrets to keep. That was home for Malik. It wasn't much, but it was something. He was the kind of kid who never quite fit the box people tried to put him in. Too smart for the back pews at Sunday church, too poor for the robotics club in the next county. Too curious for farm life, too loyal to ever leave it behind. People in town used to joke, that Thompson boy's gonna blow something up one day with all his gadgets. Then came the town council meeting. You're telling me, the mayor had said, barely containing a grin, that you've built a bunch of smoke detectors, in trees? There were chuckles from the crowd. Real ones. The kind that dig under your skin. Malik stood behind a shaky folding table with wires, circuit boards, and a hand-drawn diagram of what he'd dubbed FIRESON, Fire Intelligent Response Emergency Sensor Observation Network. It was clunky, sure. But it was real. It's more than that, he'd said, voice steady but hands sweating. It learns wind patterns. It detects temperature spikes, barometric shifts. It can predict the spread of fire in real time if we just give you the woods, someone called out from the back. More laughter. His fingers curled around the table edge. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from, a local YouTuber teased, mock holding a fake mic, this story might just spark a new beginning. Tell us, Malik, what's one thing that pushes you forward even when things get tough? Malik didn't smile. He didn't blink. Knowing that one day, when it matters, I'll be right. Silence. Then someone clapped. Just one person. Sam. His best friend. Later that night, Malik sat alone under the stars, back against the barn, and rewired the main sensor node by moonlight. There was a scar just under his thumb from a soldering iron burn he got at 13. He ran his finger over it absently as he thought about the laughter. He remembered his mom's voice, soft and steady, before cancer stole her from them, don't wait for folks to understand you, baby. Build it anyway. Prove it works. So, he did. Every day after working the farm with his dad, Malik spent hours refining the system. He scoured online forums, watched lectures from MIT students on YouTube, reverse-engineered home security cameras. Whatever he couldn't afford, he rebuilt from scrap. What he couldn't find, he invented. He even borrowed Sam's old GoPro to monitor animal movement as a proxy for potential fire behavior. It was rough. It was ugly. But it was his. 2 summers later, the sensors had multiplied, small, camouflaged units nailed to trees across miles of forest edge. Some ran on tiny solar panels, others powered by hand-cranked generators Malik built from fishing reels. The local kids called them the tree bots. Hunters called them junk. But they worked. When a lightning strike caused a small blaze in a dry gully one night, Malik's system picked it up before anyone smelled smoke. He texted Sam, who was now volunteering at the fire station. Within an hour, the flames were under control. The town didn't celebrate. They didn't even know. The official report listed early citizen notice as the reason for containment. Malik didn't care. Not really. At least, that's what he told himself. But today, this day, everything changed. As fire crews scrambled and emergency channels failed, someone finally remembered Malik's warning email from 3 days ago. He'd sent it to the mayor, the fire chief, and even the local newspaper. Conditions are high risk. Based on wind models and drought readings, fire spread could reach town limits within 48 to 72 hours. Fireson is active and already seeing alerts. No one replied. But now, standing at the edge of the ridge, the mayor wasn't laughing. The fire had jumped Route 12 and was heading straight for the elementary school. Sam was barking orders into a walkie. "Get me Malik, now." He knows these woods better than anyone. And his systems are only eye in the sky right now. Malik was already moving. Boots crunching over dry pine needles, laptop slung across his shoulder, he hiked through smoke and heat toward the main relay node. He typed as he moved, routing sensor data to the fire crew's private server. GPS coordinates. Heat intensity. Wind speed. Fire vectors. Fireson lit up with orange and red and yellow, like a war map from a sci-fi movie. Except this was real. This was home. And he was right. They had laughed at a farmer's son with junkyard tech. But today, that same, crazy fire idea was saving thousands. And it was only the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before the sirens. Before the fire. Before the laughter and the sensors nailed to trees, there was just Malik Thompson, age 7, kneeling in the back row of First Baptist Church of Briar Ridge, picking at a loose thread in his too small dress pants and wondering if God could hear him over the sound of Deacon Harris's snoring. His mama sat next to him, straight-backed, hat tilted just so, with her gloved hands folded in her lap like a woman who had never once considered being anywhere else but right here, praising the Lord. Malik used to think she had superpowers, because somehow, even with her eyes closed in prayer, she could always tell when he was fidgeting. "Sit still, baby," she whispered that Sunday, without even looking. That was the thing about Mama, she saw him. Always. Her name was Loretta Thompson, and everyone in Briar Ridge knew her as Miss Loretta. She worked nights at the nursing home and still made it to every Sunday service, every PDA meeting, and every school robotics fair, even the ones Malik didn't win. She was the kind of person who believed in miracles and made you believe in them, too. Even when the miracle was just finding a way to stretch canned green beans and instant rice into something that tasted like Sunday supper. His dad, Jeremiah, was different. Quiet. Weathered. Hands like rope and a face carved from seasons of sun and worry. He never missed a harvest, never raised his voice, and rarely prayed out loud. Malik loved them both in different ways. His mom made life feel possible. His dad made life feel real. But when Loretta passed, cancer that came fast and mean, it was like someone unplugged all the joy in the house. Jeremiah stopped playing gospel on the radio. He stopped leaving the porch light on for Malik when he stayed late at the school lab. He never said no, but he stopped saying much of anything. And Malik? He started building. It began with old radios. Then toaster ovens. Then the busted security camera he found in a junk pile behind the town's only gas station. He'd wire it all together in the barn, his little lab, behind the rusted tractor and the broken hay baler. That was the year he started talking less, too. Not because he didn't want to speak. No one around seemed to hear him anymore. Except Sam. Sam Riggins lived 2 miles down a dirt road that turned into a swamp after every good rain. His dad, Dennis, ran the town's only fire station, and Sam had been driving the truck before he could grow facial hair. He was the kind of kid who knew how to rebuild a carburetor but couldn't pass algebra without copying Malik's notes. They were opposites in every visible way. Sam was stocky, freckled, and loud, while Malik was lean, quiet, and constantly in thought, but something about their friendship just worked. It wasn't even a friendship at first. It started with a science fair project in 6th grade. Sam brought the wood, Malik brought the wires. They built a volcano that erupted with colored smoke, won second place, and never really stopped teaming up after that. Sam didn't understand how Malik's brain worked half the time, but he respected it. And more importantly, he didn't laugh. One summer, the two of them spent every evening climbing trees and installing what Malik called early warning modules. They looked like birdhouses from a distance, except they had little blinking lights and antennae sticking out like mechanical whiskers. Jeremiah watched them from the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight. "What good is all that tech nonsense gonna do when a real fire comes?" he asked one evening, not unkindly. Malik wiped sweat from his forehead and looked his dad in the eye. "It might help us know before it happens." Jeremiah grunted. "Fire don't care about wires, boy. It eats everything." That was the closest thing to a compliment Malik had gotten all year. There were plenty of fires in Briar Ridge history. Old-timers still talked about the Great Blaze of '73, when flames danced across the pine flats like they had a score to settle. Malik had read every article about it he could find, studied the wind patterns, cross-referenced every recorded fire with rainfall stats and lightning data. He'd become obsessed, not with fire itself, but with the idea of predicting it. Stopping it before it became a monster. He pitched the idea to his 8th grade science teacher. She smiled, nodded, and wrote, very imaginative, at the top of his report before filing it away and moving on. The world kept telling him to dream smaller. He didn't listen. Years passed. The farm dried up more each summer. Malik's hands grew calloused from morning chores and late-night circuit building. He taught himself to code, using an old Dell laptop Sam found at a pawn shop. He learned about AI, how it could learn patterns, adapt, even simulate environmental models. What if, he thought, the land talks, and all we have to do is listen? By sophomore year, Malik had a working prototype, a solar-powered sensor that could read heat, humidity, and wind vectors. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. And no one cared. Except Sam. One Sunday, they were sitting on the truck bed after church, passing a bottle of warm Coke and watching storm clouds roll in. Malik was sketching upgrades for his system on a crumpled napkin. "You ever think of leaving?" Sam asked, breaking the silence. "Where would I go?" "I dunno. Somewhere that gets you." Malik shook his head. "This is where the fires happen. This is where I need to be." Sam nodded, slow. "Well, you're not crazy. Just so you know." Malik smiled at that. He didn't need the whole town to believe. He just needed to be ready for the day they finally had to. The day the dirt roads and Sunday prayers wouldn't be enough. And that day was coming. He felt it. Burning on the horizon. The thing about building anything, dreams, machines, even friendships, is that sometimes they short out. And sometimes they burn. Malik Thompson learned that the hard way on a Thursday afternoon in late September, when the back of the barn exploded in a puff of black smoke and the smell of melting plastic. He stood there, eyes wide, holding a smoking breadboard and blinking at what used to be 3 weeks of soldering work. His eyebrows were half singed. One of the solar panel cables had shorted and surged through the rest of the circuitry like a lightning bolt in a bottle. "Damn," he whispered, which for Malik was the equivalent of someone else screaming. Jeremiah came running from the front field, hoe still in hand. He paused in the doorway, looking between Malik and the charred remains of the prototype scattered across the barn floor. "You good?" Malik coughed, waved off the smoke, and nodded. "Yeah. Just a glitch." Jeremiah squinted at the mess. "That the fancy firebox?" It was. The silence that followed was as thick as the smell of burnt insulation. Jeremiah shifted the hoe to his other hand. "That thing you brought to the town meeting?" Malik nodded. Jeremiah sighed through his nose. "Maybe take a break from it a while. Before you burn the whole damn barn down." That was it. No lecture. No help. Just a man too tired to keep caring about something he couldn't see the value in. Malik stayed up most of that night sweeping the ash into a dustpan and rewiring what parts still worked. His hands trembled, not from the damage, but from the disappointment that seeped into his chest like water in a cracked pipe. He'd thought this version was the version. The one that would prove them all wrong. He had planned to take it to the statewide youth engineering conference in Trenton. It was the biggest tech fair in the region, full of kids from STEM schools and magnet academies. Malik had printed a handout, built a presentation, even scraped together money from Sam and a part-time weekend lawn job to register. But now all he had was scorched wires and a fried processor. And a deadline 3 days away. Sam showed up the next morning with a paper bag full of gas station donuts and a used Raspberry Pi microcontroller wrapped in a sandwich bag. "It's not much," he said, dropping the parts on Malik's workbench. "But I figured you'd still be stupid enough to try." Malik smirked. "You know me." "Yeah," Sam grinned. "I do." By Friday night, they had something cobbled together. It wasn't pretty, half the parts were held down with duct tape and hope, but it ran. Barely. Malik uploaded the sensor algorithm and built a basic demo using a space heater and a smoke source made from burning sage sticks in a tin can. They took it to Trenton in Sam's beat-up Ford, the back seat full of wires, loose notes, and Malik's only dress shirt, still on the hanger. The conference was overwhelming. Booths packed with kids in matching team shirts, glossy posters, 3D printed prototypes, drones, and tablet displays. Malik stood in a corner with his janky fire sensor in a wooden box and a laptop that took 5 minutes to boot. Judges passed him by. Twice. A woman in a Stanford hoodie glanced at his table and gave a polite smile, then moved on to a group of private school students demoing a wildfire prediction app with corporate sponsors and investor backing. Malik kept smiling. Kept explaining. Kept demoing. One kid stopped. Listened. Nodded. Wrote something on a card and slipped it into Malik's hand. "Your idea's solid. Real solid. Needs polish. Keep pushing. R. Chandler, Fireline Analytics." It wasn't a trophy. But it was something. He didn't win. Didn't even place. And as they packed up the booth, Malik sat on the edge of the stage staring at the polished marble floor, feeling like he'd just run a marathon with no finish line. Sam nudged him with a soda. "You're not mad?" "I'm tired," Malik muttered. "I thought this would be different. I thought they'd. I don't know. See it." "They will," Sam said. "Someday." Malik looked up. "You really believe that?" Sam shrugged. "Hell yeah, I do. That thing in the barn. That's not some science fair gimmick. That's a warning system that works. And when the world finally catches fire, they're gonna wish they listened. But belief only stretches so far when rent's late and the tractor won't start." That fall, Malik considered quitting. Not because he didn't believe in the idea, but because it was exhausting being the only one who did. He started skipping days in the barn. Skipped meals. Turned down Sam's calls more than once. The world felt heavier. Quieter. One night, Jeremiah left a box on the kitchen table. Inside was his mother's old church journal. Tucked between the pages was a note in her handwriting. "He's not gonna be like other boys. That's okay. Let him build." Malik read it 3 times. Then he went to the barn, flipped on the work light and started over. That winter, a dry cold settled over New Jersey. The town forgot about Malik's sensor system. Forgot about the council meeting. Forgot about the boy with the wires in the trees. But Malik didn't forget. He rebuilt Fireson with better sensors. Installed new logic boards. He modified the algorithm to factor in satellite wind data and open-source fire behavior models. He coded all night and worked the farm by day. He didn't talk about it. Didn't post. Didn't ask permission. People thought he was wasting his time. But Malik had stopped waiting for approval. He didn't need them to believe. He just needed them to be safe when the fire came. Because one day, it would come. And when it did, he'd be ready. Even if the rest of the world wasn't. Malik Thompson didn't wake up one morning and decide he'd be the kid who could outsmart fire. No. The crazy fire idea came slow, like smoke seeping under a door. It was born in late nights, after chores, when he'd sit in the barn with a busted laptop, watching wildfires rage across California, Oregon, and Australia. Entire towns turned to ash while warning systems failed or came too late. He saw interviews of survivors, heard the fear in their voices, and it stuck with him like sap on skin. One woman cried into the camera, "We didn't even hear the sirens. We didn't get the text. It just came." That was the moment. That was the spark. Malik didn't want to build something that warned you at the last minute. He wanted to build something that knew, before you smelled smoke. The heart of Fireson wasn't the hardware. It wasn't the wires or motion sensors or recycled weatherproof casings made from water bottles. It was the algorithm. Malik called it Sonar Fire Sense. It didn't just detect heat or smoke, it watched patterns, wind shifts, temperature dips after long droughts, wildlife movements, and humidity trends. It mimicked what forest rangers and fire crews tried to do, but in real time, and at scale. At first, Malik tested it using old weather data and simulated scenarios. If a lightning strike occurred after 5 days without rain and winds were blowing northwest, the model predicted a spread zone. And it was accurate. Freakishly accurate. He fed it more data. Made it smarter. By senior year, Fireson could predict fire behavior in Pine Barrens with 86% accuracy based on just 10 sensors. Malik smiled the first time he saw the system flag a potential blaze, and 2 days later, there was a small fire in the very zone it predicted. No one else saw it. No one else cared. But Malik knew. That's when he made the decision. He wouldn't wait for a grant. Wouldn't wait for the mayor. Wouldn't wait for validation. He'd take the crazy fire idea and go all in. Every dollar he earned mowing lawns or helping Sam's dad with engine repairs went into parts. His room looked like Radio Shack exploded. The walls were covered in maps and fire paths. His laptop was held together by duct tape and desperation. Jeremiah watched from the doorway one night, arms folded. "Still on that fire project?" Malik didn't look up. "It's not a project. It's a system." Jeremiah was quiet. "Then, your mama would have loved this." Malik stopped typing. That was the most his father had said about it in months. The town wasn't so kind. The nickname started as a joke. Fire Boy. Kids at school would call him that when he walked by. Some of them made sound effects. Others mimed little explosions. Malik kept his head down, backpack full of soldering kits and notebooks. "You gonna set the school on fire too, Fire Boy?" Even some teachers raised eyebrows when Malik submitted fire spread simulations for class projects. One counselor asked if he was obsessed in a concerning way. Only Sam stood by him, smacking a few of the louder kids upside the head when needed. Malik didn't fight it. He just kept building. When senior year came around, guidance counselors started talking about college applications, scholarships. Malik didn't apply. Not because he didn't want to go, but because the fire didn't care if he had a degree. It would come, degree or not. So while his classmates dreamed of dorm rooms and football games, Malik was crawling through brush, mounting new sensor units on high ground. He upgraded them to self-calibrate and report real-time updates through mesh network relays, even without internet. Sam helped him write a field manual. "Gotta be ready in case someone besides you needs to use this thing," Sam said, flipping through the spiral notebook. Malik grinned. "You think they ever will?" "I think they won't have a choice." Then came the council meeting. That infamous day. The one where everything could have changed, and didn't. Malik had prepared for weeks. Printed out graphs, uploaded videos of system tests, even created a 3D simulation of how the town would look if a wildfire started just outside Pine Hollow and traveled with a northwest wind. The presentation was sharp. The science was sound. The problem? The people in charge weren't listening. They were smiling, but they weren't hearing him. The mayor looked amused. The fire chief looked half asleep. One of the council members whispered to another and stifled a laugh. When Malik reached the end and explained that with just $3,000 he could install a full network of nodes across the region's fire risk zone, the room got quiet. And then the mayor leaned into the mic. "You want us to fund smoke detectors in trees?" Laughter broke out. Malik stood there, alone, blinking at the room like they were the ones who didn't make sense. "I'm not asking for much," he said. "Just a chance to prove it works." The mayor smiled. "Well, son, when the forest starts talking, we'll know who to call." They laughed. But Malik didn't fold. He packed up his demo, walked out of that room with Sam beside him, and said 3 words that stayed etched into his memory. "I'm not done." That night, he walked miles into the woods and installed 4 more nodes, using parts from a junked RC car, a smoke detector he'd pulled from his own house, and solar cells he'd soldered together on a piece of plexiglass. Each one went live with a soft blink of green. Each one whispered to the others through the trees. A mesh of warning. A system waiting for its moment. He didn't care if they laughed anymore. Because the fire wouldn't laugh. It would just come. And when it did, Malik would be ready. Crazy idea or not. It started with a spark. Not a dramatic explosion or a lightning bolt from a movie, just a dry snap. A branch brushed a power line near the edge of Pine Hollow, unnoticed by anyone except the hawks overhead and a single sensor node nailed to a longleaf pine. Fireson caught it. Node 12 pinged Node 7. Node 7 relayed to the base hub in Malik's barn. Timestamp, 4:41 a.m. Temp spike, plus 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity drop, minus 6%. Wind shift, NESW at 13 miles per hour. Smoke detected, trace. Status, unconfirmed ignition event. Malik, still half asleep with a hoodie over his head and one boot off, sat up at the first chime of the alert. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and squinted at the screen. The red box wasn't a test. It wasn't an error. It was real. He stared at the map, satellite overlay, terrain lines, a digital ghost of Pine Hollow overlaid with blinking heat signatures. The system ran a wind sim. The fire wasn't big yet. But the wind. Oh no. The wind was wrong. Fire loves wind the way matches love gasoline. It's not just a partner, it's an accomplice. And this wind wasn't just blowing through, it was pushing. Hard. Toward Briar Ridge. Malik's fingers flew across the keyboard. He toggled wind projection. Input barometric data. Ran the spread simulator. 36 minutes. That's how long it would take, if the fire jumped the old logging trail, to reach the north edge of the town. By the time the first 911 call was made, it would already be halfway there. He grabbed his phone and called Sam. No answer. Called again. Still nothing. Malik threw on his boots, backpack already half-packed with batteries, a tablet, and his manual relay controller. He ran outside. The barn door creaked open, screen still flashing. Potential wildfire path, high-risk zone. He jumped in the truck, the old Ford Jeremiah barely kept running, and floored it down the dirt road toward the fire station. The sun wasn't even up yet, but the sky was already smeared orange-gray. Not dawn. Smoke. By the time he reached the station, Sam was stumbling out, hair a mess, radio in hand. You saw it? Malik called, breathless. I just got the dispatch. For units already rolling out to Pine Hollow, but it's spreading fast. Malik tossed his tablet onto the hood of the truck and opened the SIM. Your crews don't have the full picture. They're headed straight into it. Sam looked at the projection, fire lines, wind arcs, and a blinking red path toward town. This is from Fireson. Real time. It's not perfect, but it's close. Sam didn't hesitate. You're coming with me. Bring the tablet. They rode in the lead engine. Malik sat up front, mapping the fire's movement in real time while Sam relayed orders. At first, the other firefighters weren't sure what to make of Malik. He wasn't one of them. No uniform. No badge. Just a skinny kid with a backpack full of circuits. But when his predictions saved Unit 3 from being cut off by a sudden wind gust, and when Malik redirected a tanker around a smoldering ditch before it reignited, they started listening. The crazy fire idea was talking now. And people were hearing it. As morning light broke over the hills, fire crews formed a perimeter, guided not just by experience, but by Malik's data. He climbed up the radio tower himself and installed a long-range repeater that patched Fireson into the station's grid. By noon, the mayor showed up. Hair uncombed. Shirt sweat-soaked. Where's the kid? Malik was inside the command truck, pointing to a cluster of markers on a screen. Right here, he said, not even turning. The mayor blinked. You were serious about all this. Malik finally looked up. You think? There was no laughter this time. By 2 p.m., the fire had jumped 2 containment lines, but the crews were ahead of it every step of the way. Fireson wasn't just predicting spread. It was guiding strategy. Crews called in flare-ups. Malik entered data. The system updated every 3 minutes. You just made the town's response system look like a flip phone next to an iPhone, Sam muttered, watching another hotspot get flagged. Malik's eyes were locked on the screen. I didn't do it to show them up. Still, Sam said. You showed up. Big time. But not everything was under control. At 4:17 p.m., Fireson flagged something new, a secondary blaze. East of the main fire. Unrelated to the wind spread. Malik zoomed in. That's a jump fire. Wind carried embers over the containment. Sam grabbed the mic. We need crews east of the school. Now. The mayor looked confused. How can you be sure? Malik didn't answer. He pointed at the screen. 2 minutes later, smoke was visible over the treetops. The fire was moving like it knew the land, curling around hills, feeding on dried leaves, crawling beneath pine bark, ready to explode out the other side. Fireson adapted. It replotted paths. Reissued warnings. And for the first time in town history, the response wasn't late. They were just in time. By nightfall, the fire was finally contained. Homes were saved. No lives lost. And everyone in Briar Ridge knew exactly who to thank. Malik sat on the tailgate of the fire engine, hoodie covered in ash, watching the last flare-ups die in the distance. The mayor approached, awkward. "Son. I don't have the words. We owe you." "I didn't do it for the town," Malik said quietly. "I did it because nobody else would." He stood, brushing off the ash. "But now that you're listening, we've got work to do." They'd called it crazy. A kid with wires in trees. Birdhouse sensors and fire dreams. But when fire met wind, and wind met code, that crazy idea saved the town. 3 days after the fire, Malik Thompson was still running on 4 hours of sleep and half a granola bar he found in his backpack. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a strange emptiness, like his body hadn't realized the danger was over. Briar Ridge was safe. Because of him. Because of Fireson. Word had spread like fire. First it was local chatter. Then Facebook posts from grateful residents. Then the county newspaper ran a front-page article with the headline, "Teens Fire Detection System Helps Save Briar Ridge from Wildfire." Malik didn't even know the reporter had been there. By the next morning, his inbox had exploded. The mayor wanted a sit-down. A state environmental officer had sent a formal inquiry. Rutgers University's Fire Science Department asked if he'd consider a research collaboration. And then there was the email from the producer at Good Morning America. Subject line: "We'd love to tell your story." Malik stared at the email like it was a glitch. His laptop was still slow, the screen cracked at the corner, with a piece of duct tape holding the hinge in place. He read it again. They wanted to fly him to New York City. They wanted to put him on live TV. "You know you can say no, right?" Sam said, lounging on the porch swing. "I know," Malik muttered. "But are you going to?" Malik looked up. "What if I mess it up? I've never done anything like this." "Malik," Sam said, leaning forward, "you faced down a wildfire. I think you can handle a few cameras." The night before the interview, Malik stayed at a hotel near Times Square. It was the nicest place he'd ever been, soft sheets, glowing lights, pillows that felt like clouds. But he barely slept. His stomach twisted, his hands wouldn't stop tapping. He missed the barn. Missed the dirt under his nails. Missed silence. At 6 a.m., a car picked him up and took him to the studio. He wore his best button-up shirt, clean, pressed, and borrowed from Sam's dad. The makeup team powdered his face, fixed his collar, and told him to smile like you're talking to someone who loves you. He wasn't sure what that felt like anymore. But he nodded anyway. The set was all lights and angles. Cameras on tracks. Hosts with perfect smiles. One of them, Laura, shook his hand gently and said, "We are so excited about your story. Just speak from the heart, okay?" Malik nodded, throat dry. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3. And then they were live. Today, we're joined by Malik Thompson, the 18-year-old inventor behind a fire detection system that helped save an entire New Jersey town from disaster. Malik smiled nervously. Laura leaned in. "Malik, you grew up in Briar Ridge. Not exactly Silicon Valley. How did this idea even start?" Malik took a breath. "After my mom passed, I didn't have a lot of people to talk to. So I started building. At first, it was just to keep my hands busy. But then I started reading about wildfires, about how communities don't get enough warning. I thought, maybe I could do something." "And you did," the other host chimed in. "Tell us about Fireson." Malik nodded. "It's a distributed sensor network. It tracks environmental data, wind, heat, humidity, smoke, and uses AI to model the spread of fire in real time. It's not perfect, but it gives people a head start. And sometimes, that's the difference." "And this was all self-taught?" Laura asked, her eyebrows lifting. "Yeah. I just kept learning. Online, mostly. I couldn't afford much, so I recycled parts, borrowed what I could. I guess you don't need a lab if you have a barn. The crew laughed. It was gentle, warm laughter. Not like the town council's. Laura placed a hand on his arm. Malik, people are calling you a hero. I'm not, Malik said, almost too quickly. I just wanted to build something that mattered. Something that could help. When the interview ended, Malik stepped off the set into a hallway, where his legs finally gave out. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, his heartbeat still racing like he was facing down flames. A producer handed him a phone. You've got some people who want to say hi. On the screen were videos, dozens of them. Residents of Briar Ridge, recording messages from their porches, schools, and storefronts. Thank you, Malik. You saved my home. My mom made me brownies and said I should mail them to you. We believe in you, Fire Boy. He laughed at that one. Cried at another. Jeremiah had sent one, too. The video was short. Just him standing in front of the barn, arms crossed, face as stoic as ever. Didn't see it at first. Now I do. You built something real, son. Proud of you. Malik blinked back tears and whispered, thanks, Dad. By the time he flew home, his name was all over social media. #FireSon was trending on X. A crowdfunding campaign had started, run by a local teacher, and had already hit $48,000 in donations. People weren't laughing anymore. They were listening. Back in Briar Ridge, Malik returned to the barn. The same worn-out workbench. The same solder iron. But everything felt different now. A reporter from the Trenton Times called him the pioneer of Pine Hollow. Rutgers offered him a full scholarship. A state senator wanted to meet. Even FEMA reached out. But all Malik wanted was to keep working. Because he knew something no one else did. That fire was only the beginning. There would be floods. Droughts. Storms. And whole towns like Briar Ridge that would never see help in time, unless someone like him kept building. That interview didn't make Malik a hero. It just made the world notice. What came next would be bigger than one fire. The storm rolled in 2 weeks after Malik's interview aired. Not the kind of storm you could outrun. This one crawled in slow, thick with warning, gray skies swelling with pressure, air so still the birds stopped flying. The local news was already throwing around terms like atmospheric river and microburst event. Malik stood outside the barn, eyes scanning the clouds, one hand gripping the frame of the door like it might float away. You ever notice how quiet it gets, he said. Sam, chewing sunflower seeds beside him, nodded. Like the world's holding its breath. Yeah. Malik didn't say it, but he didn't like that kind of silence. It was the same quiet he heard the day before his mom passed. The kind that comes before something breaks. The first storm surge hit the coast. It wasn't local, but it gave Malik an idea. If FireSon could read environmental cues for fire behavior, why couldn't it do the same for floods? He pulled up the original code on his laptop, fingers already itching with potential. The base logic, pattern recognition, predictive mapping, wasn't exclusive to fire. The variables changed, sure, but the need was the same. Early warning. He opened a new file, project name, FireSon. Sam squinted at the screen. Flood Sun. Flood sensor, Malik said, smirking. You naming it or building it? Both, apparently. They laughed. It felt good, until the power blinked. Once. Twice. Then everything shut off. Malik grabbed a flashlight and looked outside. All of Briar Ridge had gone dark. The storm hit overnight. Rain like hammers. Wind like wolves. Malik lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He didn't feel safe, even under a roof. The barn sensors were still pinging into the local mesh network, thank God for solar backup, but the server was offline. He had no real-time feedback. No early warnings to give. He felt blind. He hated it. Morning brought chaos. Trees down. Power lines snapped. Roads impassable. And Briar Ridge's north side was underwater. The river had overflowed, 24 hours earlier than expected. Malik stood at the town center, watching volunteers fill sandbags too late. Cars were half submerged, and people were being carried from their homes on boats and ATVs. I could have warned them, he muttered. Sam, drenched and exhausted, looked up from his phone. Don't put that on yourself. I'm not, Malik said. I'm putting it on the system. He pulled the tablet from his pack. Even without internet, Firesen's nodes had stored weather shifts, barometric pressure drops, soil saturation. The data was there. He just hadn't trained the algorithm to listen. That night, Malik set up 3 new node designs. This time, they measured rainfall velocity, saturation levels in soil, and temperature anomalies in storm clouds. He used leftover microcontrollers, old garden stakes, and an upside-down colander to shield one from hail. Firesen's getting a sister, he muttered, soldering wires under a flickering lantern. Jeremiah leaned against the doorframe. Didn't you just save the town? I warned them, Malik said. Didn't save them from this. Jeremiah didn't speak for a moment. Then he walked over and handed Malik an old sketchbook. It was his mother's. Malik opened it. Inside, notes, ideas, diagrams from years ago. Rainwater barrels. Garden drainage concepts. Community design sketches for sustainable farming during dry seasons. She always said the world was changing, Jeremiah said quietly. Wanted you to be ready. Malik ran his fingers over the pages. She was. By the weekend, Flossen was live, limited, rough, but working. He set the sensors along the riverbanks, cross-checked them with public NOAA data, and set triggers for soil saturation. If readings hit dangerous levels, the system would send an alert directly to his tablet and the fire station. 2 sensors isn't a network, Sam pointed out. It's a start, Malik replied. Word spread. Not because Malik made it viral. Because people saw him. Fixing storm drains. Climbing poles. Walking into knee-deep water to check a faulty node. Not a camera in sight. Just Malik, the fire boy, who now chased floods, too. The mayor showed up with a clipboard and a federal grant application. We've got eyes on us now, he said. We should apply. Malik frowned. We. The mayor chuckled. Fair enough. You should apply. The grant was for community resilience innovation. $100,000 to pilot climate response systems in small towns. Malik sat at his desk for 3 nights rewriting the application. This wasn't like school. There were no multiple-choice questions, no grades. Just the possibility of something real. Something bigger than Briar Ridge. He submitted it at 3:12 a.m. with hands shaking from too much coffee and too little sleep. Then he waited. And while he waited, he kept building. When the letter came, it was from the U.S. Department of Environmental Innovation. He didn't open it right away. He walked to the barn, hands in his pockets, heart thudding. Jeremiah found him there. You gonna read it or just stare at it all day? Malik opened the envelope. He read the first line. Then he sat down on the floor, knees weak. What's it say? Jeremiah asked. Malik looked up, smiling. They said yes. The grant was more than money. It was validation. But it came with conditions, project documentation, partnerships, community engagement. Malik would need a team, a headquarters, a testing zone. He'd need allies. Sam volunteered first. Then his old physics teacher. Then the town librarian. Even the mayor offered office space in the unused wing of town hall. People were starting to believe. Not just in the system. In Malik. Fireson was saving homes. Flossen was protecting streets. And Malik? He was just getting started. Because storms were getting stronger. And he'd be ready for them, too. It started with the town square. One by one, the old planters were replaced with flood-resistant garden beds, raised with reclaimed wood. Downspouts from the courthouse were rerouted into water barrels. Solar-powered lights replaced the flickering yellow lamps. A digital screen, donated by a retired alum from MIT, sat beneath the flagpole, broadcasting real-time data from Fireson and Flossen. Today's fire risk, low. Riverbank saturation, 62%. Storm watch, none active. The people of Briar Ridge had always been proud, stubborn folk. They didn't like being told what to do, especially by a teenager. But when that teenager's ideas saved their homes not once, but twice, something shifted. They stopped seeing Malik Thompson as, that fire kid. Now they called him the system guy. Sometimes even just Malik, with respect in their voices. Malik had always worked alone, out of necessity more than choice. Trust didn't come easy when people only saw your value after the disaster. But the grant changed that. So did the storm. And maybe, so did the fact that people were starting to see the future coming right at them, and they didn't want to face it blind. Within a month, Malik had a team. Sam ran field ops, installing new sensor nodes across town and in neighboring townships. He called it sneaker techang, since most of it was done on foot with nothing but a wrench, duct tape, and Malik scribbled diagrams. Mrs. Blanchard, Malik's old science teacher, came out of early retirement to help manage data and reports. She brought her dog to meetings and made everyone tea, but she also had a brain like a laser and a spreadsheet for every scenario. And then there was Maya. Maya Richardson showed up with a camera in one hand and a drone in the other. She was doing a documentary series called The Next Defenders, featuring young innovators tackling climate change in their own communities. Malik had tried to dodge the interview. "I'm not a defender," he told her. "Too bad," she said, already filming. Maya wasn't from Briar Ridge. She was from Atlanta, sharp-tongued, fast-talking, and completely unimpressed by small-town politics. But she saw something in Malik's work that went beyond fire and floods. "You're building a blueprint," she told him. "One town now. But imagine 20. Or 200. Malik hadn't thought that far ahead. Until she said it out loud. The documentary didn't just capture Malik's systems, it captured the town. Farmers with mud on their boots, looking at wind charts on their phones. Kids in the library learning how to read humidity graphs. Seniors signing up to be sensor stewards, maintaining equipment on their properties like it was part of the community garden. Briar Ridge had always been rural. Now, it was resilient. One night, Maya followed Malik into the barn. He didn't notice her at first. He was kneeling beside an open casing, tweaking the heat sink on a new node prototype. Wires everywhere. A soldering iron humming low. "Do you ever stop?" she asked. Malik didn't look up. "Not really." "Why?" He paused. "Set the tool down. Because if I stop, the storm doesn't. The fire doesn't. And the system won't build itself." Maya turned off her camera. "What happens when you do finish it?" Malik finally looked up. "Then I start the next one." Back in town, the changes were obvious. The school hosted its first ever climate resilience fair. Kids showed off homemade wind sensors, ran simulations using Malik's public API, and asked more questions than the teachers could answer. The fire station was now equipped with tablets tied directly into Fireson. When the chief called a drill, the alerts came from Malik's network, faster than any radio broadcast. A local coffee shop printed daily fire risk reports on their cups. And one Sunday morning, the church pastor said this in his sermon. "We can't stop the storms, friends. But we can be ready. And thanks to a certain young man in our town, we are." But not everyone was celebrating. A development group from out of state had come sniffing around. They saw the buzz, the headlines, the grants. And they wanted in. They offered the mayor a partnership to modernize Briar Ridge. Smart infrastructure. Outsourced AI services. A proposal to take over and scale Malik's system, commercialize it. Malik saw the presentation. He said nothing through the whole pitch. Afterward, he stood up and looked the developers in the eye. This system wasn't built to be sold. The mayor cleared his throat. "Malik, think of the growth. Jobs. Exposure." "I am thinking of growth," Malik said. "Real growth. The kind where people learn to build it themselves, not just buy it and forget it." The room went silent. The developers didn't get a call back. That night, Malik walked out to the river alone. Flowson's newest sensor blinked softly beneath the bridge. The data stream glowed on his tablet. The system was learning. Growing. So was he. He looked up at the stars, remembering his mom's voice, how she used to say storms were just the sky letting off pressure. That every thunderclap meant something was moving forward. He smiled. Let it move. The town wasn't just transformed. It was transforming others. Neighboring towns started calling. First for advice. Then for help installing nodes. Then for partnerships. Malik made the software open source. He gave away the designs. He taught high schoolers how to build their own mesh networks using soda cans and scavenged circuit boards. And when someone asked him if he felt like a leader now, he said, "I feel like someone who just didn't give up." Briar Ridge wasn't a tech hub. It didn't need to be. It was a blueprint. And Malik Thompson? He was just the spark. The call came on a Tuesday morning, just after Malik had finished checking the sensors along the North Ridge. The sky was clear for the first time in days, but the breeze carried a chill that hinted at another storm brewing somewhere far off. Malik didn't think anything of it when his phone buzzed. It was likely another call about technical support or a question from one of the neighboring towns. He didn't expect it to be from California. "Malik Thompson?" a voice asked. Smooth, confident, like someone who'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Speaking," Malik said, squinting at the phone, confused by the area code. "My name's David Castillo. I'm the Chief Resilience Officer for the California Climate Action Fund." The man's voice was calm but carried weight. "I'm calling because we've been following your work. We think what you've built in Briar Ridge has huge potential to scale nationwide. We want to talk about a partnership." Malik stopped in his tracks, the wind picking up as he processed the words. California Climate Action Fund. Nationwide. He had built something useful. People were calling him. Asking for advice. But this? I'm sorry. Can you say that again? "We've been tracking your system, Fireson and Flowson, and we believe you're on the verge of creating something that could help thousands of small communities adapt to climate change. We'd like to offer you funding and support to scale your technology across the country. It's part of a broader initiative to decentralize climate resilience and empower local communities." Malik's stomach twisted. A year ago, he was tinkering with wires in his barn, and now, someone from California was talking about nationwide partnerships. The weight of the conversation hit him like a tidal wave. "How did you even find out about me?" Malik asked. "The documentary series Maya Richardson did. We've been watching your progress, and the data from Briar Ridge speaks for itself." Maya. Malik hadn't heard from her in a few weeks. She'd finished her documentary, but it had been the kind of project that lingered long after the cameras were off. I didn't realize it was that big of a deal, Malik said, his voice unsure. It's a very big deal, Castillo said. And we believe you have something that could change the way the country prepares for climate change. What we're offering is an opportunity to build on what you've done in Briar Ridge and roll it out to other towns across the nation. Funding, development, infrastructure. The world felt dizzy for a moment. Briar Ridge, his little hometown, had started this, and now, it was turning into something much bigger. But the thought of expanding too quickly was a heavy burden. Malik's first instinct was to say no. To protect what he'd built. To keep things local. To not let anyone take control of his creation. But at the same time, this was an opportunity to make a real difference. And what exactly would you want in exchange? Malik asked cautiously. We would offer you the resources, a team of experts, access to federal funding, and guidance. In return, we'd like to collaborate with you on scaling your systems and implementing them in larger cities, and we would need the rights to use your algorithms and data as part of our broader initiative. Malik's mind raced. Rights to his data. His algorithms. That was the key to everything. Fireson and Flowson weren't just tools, they were his legacy. But he wasn't a fool. He knew scaling up would require serious resources, and if this was the path to making the system work on a larger scale, then maybe he had to consider it. I'll need time to think about this, Malik said. I didn't build this for someone else to take it over. We understand, Castillo replied smoothly. Take your time. But just know, this opportunity won't wait forever. We're interested in getting this project moving quickly. I can send you the full proposal with all the details if you're open to it. I'll take a look, Malik said, his voice quiet but determined. Thanks for reaching out. The line went dead. Malik stared at the phone for a long moment. His heart pounded, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. It wasn't just about the money, it was about how far this could go. The potential to help thousands of communities who were in the same situation as Briar Ridge. But at what cost? He wanted to talk to someone. Sam. Jeremiah. His mom, if she were still here. Instead, he pulled up the email David Castillo had promised to send and opened the file. It outlined exactly what the California Climate Action Fund was offering, what they expected, and how the partnership would work. Malik read it slowly, absorbing the details. The proposal sounded like a dream: access to experts, a national platform, resources to refine and expand Fireson and Flowson. The fund's proposal was more generous than he'd expected. But there was one part that made his gut twist: exclusive rights to the system data for a period of 10 years. 10 years. That was more than a business deal. It was control. He set the proposal aside and went outside to clear his head. The sun was sinking low over Briar Ridge, casting long shadows across the farmland. The wind had died down, but the air still felt heavy with the promise of change. The storm was coming, Malik could feel it, even if it wasn't in the sky. He needed to talk to someone. Sam was the first person he reached out to. The two had been through so much together, and Sam knew Malik better than anyone. If anyone could help him navigate this decision, it was Sam. They met at the diner later that evening. You're seriously considering it? Sam asked after hearing the whole pitch. I don't know, Malik said, swirling his coffee. I mean, it's everything I wanted, right? Resources, support, we could help so many people. But at what cost? Sam pressed. You don't want to be the face of something that's just going to get commercialized, Malik. This system is your baby. Are you ready to give it up to make it big? Malik felt his chest tighten. Sam was right. He hadn't built this system to sell it. He built it because he believed in it. He believed it could help people. He believed it could make a difference. But now, the stakes were higher than he ever imagined. I'm scared, Sam, Malik admitted. I don't want to lose control of this. I don't want to let someone take it away just for the sake of making money. Sam looked at him seriously. You won't lose yourself, Malik. But you need to decide what's more important. The mission, or the money. Because if you let them take it all, you might lose the mission. Malik sat back, lost in thought. The storm was coming, and he couldn't ignore it. The question now was whether or not he was ready for it. The next few days felt like an eternity. Malik couldn't focus. Every waking moment was consumed by the weight of the decision in front of him. The offer from California felt like the opportunity of a lifetime, but something deep down made him hesitate. Sam's words echoed in his mind. The mission, or the money? Malik paced the barn late one night, staring at the prototype nodes scattered across the workbench. His fingers brushed over the wires, the metal, the circuits he'd built by hand. This wasn't just technology to him, it was a lifeline. It was his chance to make a difference in the world. But what if it wasn't enough? What if, in trying to protect it, he missed the chance to scale it, to help people beyond Briar Ridge? The door to the barn creaked open, and Malik turned, surprised to see Maya standing in the doorway, holding a coffee cup in her hand. She had a small, knowing smile on her face, as if she'd been waiting for him to crack. Can I come in? She asked. Of course, Malik said, gesturing for her to step inside. She walked over to the workbench, looking at the various sensor nodes. Her gaze lingered on a few of the older models. You've really come a long way, Malik, she said softly. These systems, they're incredible. Malik nodded, but it felt hollow. He didn't have the heart to talk about the system. Not right now. I got a call, he said finally, his voice low. From the California Climate Action Fund. Maya raised an eyebrow, but didn't speak. She sat down on an old crate near the workbench and waited. They want to partner, Malik continued. They want me to scale this system. Nationwide. Resources, funding, the whole thing. Maya didn't look surprised. In fact, there was a certain calmness in her expression. She'd always been one to observe, never rush to give advice, but now she seemed like she was waiting for him to make up his mind. And you're torn, she said, the question hanging in the air. Malik exhaled, sinking into a chair beside her. I don't know what to do, Maya. It's everything I've wanted. But I don't know if it's meant to be that big. Maya took a slow sip of her coffee before speaking. I think you already know the answer. Malik looked up at her, confused. What do you mean? I mean, you've been building this thing because you wanted to help people. You wanted to change something. Not just in Briar Ridge, but in the world. But this isn't just about me, Malik protested. What if they take the system, Anne? If they take it, Maya interrupted gently, you won't be a part of it anymore. But if you choose to partner with them, you can still have a say. You can still control how it's used. It's about what you want to do with it. Malik stared at the floor. But what if I can't protect it? What if they take everything I've worked for? Maya leaned forward. Malik, you built this because you believe in it. That's the difference. You're not just creating a product. You're creating a movement. And sometimes, movements need resources. They need people who can push them forward. If you don't take this opportunity, someone else will. But you're the one who can make sure it stays true to your vision. Malik didn't say anything for a long while. The weight of her words pressed on him like 1,000 pounds. It felt like the entire world was standing still, waiting for him to make a choice. Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the workbench. It was an email notification. He glanced at it, then froze. It was from David Castillo, the California Climate Action Fund. The subject line read, Final Proposal, Action Required. I guess they're not waiting, Maya said quietly, standing up and grabbing her jacket. This is your moment, Malik. What are you going to do with it? Malik felt the pressure building in his chest. He stared at the email on his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. This was it. The decision he had to make, one that could alter the course of his life, the future of his system, and maybe even the future of climate resilience. He had spent so much time imagining what it would be like to have the resources, the backing, the platform to truly change the world. But now that the chance was in his hands, he wasn't sure if he was ready to let go of what had been so personal. A few minutes passed. The barn was quiet, except for the faint hum of electricity running through the equipment. Finally, Malik picked up his phone and opened the email. The terms were laid out clearly. The offer was generous, offering full funding for the next phase of development, access to cutting-edge technology, and a national platform for his systems. It seemed perfect. But then, there it was, in bold print, exclusive rights to the data for the next 10 years. Malik sighed deeply. It felt like his heart was being torn in two. The next morning, Malik stood at the edge of the ridge, overlooking Briar Ridge. The sun had just begun to rise, casting long shadows across the land. He had made his decision. He pulled out his phone, opened the email, and typed a response. Dear Mr. Castillo. Thank you for the opportunity you've offered. After much consideration, I've decided to accept your proposal. But I need to ensure that my team and I retain a significant role in shaping the future of this system. I'm willing to collaborate with the Climate Action Fund, but I will not sacrifice the core principles that guided the creation of this project. I look forward to discussing the next steps. Best regards. Malik Thompson. He hit send. Later that day, the call came again. David Castillo's voice was warm, but there was a clear edge to it, as if he had expected Malik's response. I'm glad to hear you're interested, Castillo said. But I'll be honest with you, Malik, this is a huge opportunity. We can't move forward unless we have control over the system's direction. You'll need to decide what's most important to you. Malik felt a knot form in his stomach. He had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made it all the more real. This was the moment where he had to decide if he would continue to protect what he had built or if he would give in to the pressure. I understand, Malik said, his voice steady. But this system is my vision. It's not just a tool, it's a movement. I can't let that be compromised. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I'll talk to the board, Castillo said finally. We'll see if we can make something work. I'll be in touch. Malik hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. He had made his choice, but it was far from over. Whatever happened next, he knew that he had to stay true to what he had started. The storm was still coming. But this time, he was ready for it. The call came 2 days later, early in the morning, just as Malik was wrapping up his rounds with the Fireson and Floson sensors on the ridge. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he grabbed it, his heart beating a little faster as he saw the name, David Castillo. He swiped to answer, his thumbs slightly shaky. Malik, Castillo's voice came through the speaker, clear and purposeful. We've spoken to the board. We're willing to proceed with the partnership, but we need some assurances. Your system, your data, it's clear you have something truly innovative. We want to help you get it out there, but we also need control over the implementation and distribution. Malik exhaled slowly, watching a flock of birds fly across the sky. He had expected this. The negotiation was never going to be easy, but he had made his stance clear. He wouldn't let them take everything. I'm listening, Malik replied, trying to keep his tone steady. We're willing to give you more autonomy in the development phase, but we need an agreement on intellectual property, Castillo continued. That includes some rights to the algorithms and data to ensure the systems are deployed properly across multiple regions. We also need to coordinate with our network of cities. If you're on board, we can move quickly. We're ready to start in a matter of weeks. Malik felt a wave of tension settle over him. He had hoped for a better deal, but this was the reality now. His creation was too valuable, and the larger players had their own interests. Are we talking about co-ownership? Malik asked, trying to clarify. I can't just give you full control over something I built. Castillo's tone softened. Not full control, Malik. But we need to ensure that there is coordination at the national level. If we do this, we do it together, but we also have to be able to integrate these systems into a larger infrastructure. We're talking about a whole network of communities, governments, and industries. It's a big undertaking. Malik's mind raced. The decision was harder now than ever. He had already committed to the partnership in principle, but now it was about the details, the fine print. He didn't just want to expand his work, he needed to ensure that the communities it would help weren't left behind, that the vision behind Fyerson and Flossen wasn't diluted by corporate interests. I want to make sure that any partnership protects the integrity of my systems, Malik said, feeling his resolve strengthen. I'm willing to work with you, but we need safeguards in place for the communities I'm working with. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Castillo spoke again. I understand your concerns. Let me be clear, we want this to be a collaboration, not a takeover. We'll draft an agreement with those safeguards. But I'll be honest, Malik, if you're going to get this kind of nationwide deployment, it's going to take more than just your small team. You'll need more infrastructure, more personnel, and more investment than you can manage on your own. Malik's thoughts drifted to his small team, Jeremiah, Sam, and the handful of engineers and technicians who had helped him get to this point. They were the backbone of everything he'd built, but the next step, the nationwide deployment, was a whole different beast. Could he trust California to stay true to the mission? Or would it become another corporate venture, driven by profit? I need to think about it, Malik said, his voice quieter now, filled with doubt. This is a big move. I'll let you know after I've had some time to review everything. Of course, Castillo replied smoothly. We'll send over the revised proposal. Take your time. Just remember, this opportunity won't last forever. If you're serious about scaling up, we'll need to move quickly. The line clicked off, leaving Malik alone with his thoughts, the wind picking up around him as if the storm was finally reaching its peak. He stood still for a few moments, letting the words hang in the air. He had worked so hard to get to this point, but now the question was no longer about the work, it was about how to move forward. And if the world he had dreamed of was even possible without compromising what he had fought so hard to build. Malik spent the next few days immersed in the proposal that Castillo had sent over, poring over every line of the agreement. It was clear that the California Climate Action Fund had the resources he needed to push his systems beyond Briar Ridge. They could expand Fyerson and Flossen to multiple cities, even states. But the stakes were high. The terms regarding intellectual property, as well as the control over data, still made his skin crawl. But there were some parts that made it hard to say no. The proposal included a partnership with the federal government's emergency preparedness initiatives, which would allow Fyerson and Flossen to be incorporated into national climate resilience programs. The idea of finally being able to bring his work to places like California, Texas, and Florida, areas that were at high risk of climate-related disasters, was a powerful draw. There was, however, one clause that Malik couldn't ignore. It stated that while the California Climate Action Fund would be responsible for the national rollout, Malik would have the right to approve all expansion projects. He could have a say in where the systems went, and how they were deployed. This gave him more power than he had initially expected. But still, it wasn't enough. Malik, Sam said one evening, as they sat on the porch outside the barn. You've always known it was going to be a balancing act. You can't build this thing from the ground up and expect to do it all on your own. The fact is, you need help. You need funding. And you need a platform to reach more people. Malik took a deep breath, his mind spinning. I know. But I don't want to lose control. I don't want to end up as just another cog in some big corporate machine. I get it, Sam said, his voice serious. But think about what you're doing. This system could save lives, Malik. It's not just a tech project, it's a movement. And movements need to grow. They need resources. And if you're not willing to take the help, someone else will. And you won't have any say in it. Malik's gaze drifted to the fields, where the sun was slowly sinking below the horizon. Everything felt like it was teetering on the edge, like the calm before a storm. The future of his work, his legacy, it was all in the balance. I know, Malik said quietly. I've made my decision. But it's not going to be easy. The following week, Malik signed the partnership agreement with the California Climate Action Fund. The deal was structured in a way that allowed him to retain creative control over the system, while giving the fund enough authority to implement it on a national scale. The storm had passed. And now, Malik was standing at the edge of something much bigger. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following Malik's decision to sign the agreement with the California Climate Action Fund felt like a blur. There was no fanfare, no grand celebration, just a quiet sense of finality that settled into his bones. He had made the choice. And now, the hard work of executing it began. The first step was a meeting with the fund's top leadership. Malik had flown to California for the occasion, and as he stepped off the plane, he felt the weight of the moment. It was no longer just about Briar Ridge. The small farm town he'd grown up in had shaped who he was, but the world was much bigger now. The project he had built, Fireson and Flowson, was about to become a critical part of national infrastructure. His vision was no longer just an idea, it was a lifeline for communities across the country. The California Climate Action Fund's headquarters were sleek and modern, glass windows reflecting the California sun, with high-tech conference rooms and floor-to-ceiling screens that displayed real-time climate data and disaster forecasts. Malik walked into the building with a mix of awe and skepticism. This was where the world's biggest players in environmental solutions operated, and now he was a part of it. David Castillo was waiting for him in the main conference room, his usual professional demeanor in place. He greeted Malik with a firm handshake, his smile tight but genuine. "Malik, welcome," Castillo said. "I know we're about to dive into some big plans, and I want you to feel comfortable here. This is your space, too." Malik nodded, but his mind was still racing. He wasn't sure if he could ever fully feel comfortable in a world this far removed from his roots, but he would have to adjust. The stakes were too high. The meeting began with an overview of the partnership. Castillo and his team explained the roadmap for scaling up the Fireson and Flowson systems. The goal was clear: deploy these systems in high-risk disaster zones first, then expand to more urban areas. The fund had the connections, resources, and infrastructure to make it happen. Malik was tasked with overseeing the technical aspects, design, implementation, and ensuring that the system maintained the integrity he'd built it with. At first, it felt overwhelming. There were a dozen different projects already in the pipeline, each one more complex than the last. FEMA, local governments, and private sector partners were all in the mix. Everyone had an opinion on how the technology should be deployed. Everyone wanted a piece of it. Malik spent hours poring over reports, meeting with engineers, and reviewing the data. Despite the progress, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the sheer scale of the operation, it was the constant push and pull between his original mission and the commercial realities of working with a large corporation. One afternoon, as Malik was leaving a meeting about deploying the system in California's Central Valley, he got a call from Maya. "Hey, Malik. How's it going?" Her voice sounded light, but he could tell there was something in her tone. "It's a lot," Malik replied, running a hand through his hair. "There's a lot of pressure, Maya. I mean, this is bigger than anything I ever imagined. I'm overseeing the implementation of this nationwide. There are people depending on it." Maya was quiet for a moment. "Sounds like a dream come true, huh?" "It is. But it's not just about the technology anymore. I feel like I'm losing control. Every time we take a step forward, someone else wants to take it in a different direction. People are focused on the business side, the data mining, the branding. And I can't help but wonder, what happens if I lose sight of the original goal? There was a pause on the other end. I get it, Maya said softly. But you knew this would happen, right? The more successful something is, the more it gets pulled in different directions. But that doesn't mean you've lost your voice. It just means you have to fight to keep it. Malik leaned back in his chair, looking out over the city skyline. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the streets. It's just hard. I can't help but feel like the system is becoming just another piece of a machine. It's like I'm letting the system dictate the course, instead of the other way around. Maya's voice was steady. You built it. You have a responsibility to guide it. And I'm sure you'll find a way to make it work. You just need to stay true to yourself. Remember why you started this in the first place. Malik took a deep breath, his gaze drifting to the distance. Maya was right. This wasn't about the money or the prestige. It was about the lives that could be saved, the communities that could be protected. It was about making sure that Fireson and Flossen didn't just become another tool in a corporate arsenal, but a true force for change. He thanked Maya and hung up, his mind already buzzing with new ideas. Maybe it wasn't about rejecting the corporate world. Maybe it was about bending it to his will, shaping it to fit his vision. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of meetings and planning sessions. Malik continued to work closely with the California team, but he made sure to carve out time for his own team back in Briar Ridge. Jeremiah and Sam were still there, keeping the local efforts alive and helping with the prototype adjustments. Malik didn't want to lose touch with his roots, with the community that had supported him from the beginning. As the implementation of the system began to take shape in California, Malik noticed something interesting. The initial rollout in high-risk areas like the Central Valley was already showing promising results. The system was helping to predict and mitigate the impact of heat waves and floods, offering real-time data to local emergency responders. In just a few short months, Fireson and Flossen were saving lives. And Malik could feel it, he was part of something much larger now. But it wasn't without challenges. The more cities and regions that were added to the network, the more complex it became to maintain the integrity of the original design. Malik found himself constantly battling to ensure that the technology wasn't being watered down or used for profit-driven motives. He spent late nights on conference calls, pushing back against proposals to collect more data for marketing purposes or to sell the insights to third-party companies. One afternoon, as he reviewed a proposal from a new partner, Malik received an urgent call from Jeremiah. Malik, you need to get back here. We've got a problem. It's the system. It's not behaving like it should. Malik's stomach sank. He knew this was bound to happen sooner or later. The scaling process was never easy, and the more moving parts there were, the more likely something would break. He excused himself from the meeting and booked the next flight back to Briar Ridge. His heart raced as the plane took off, the landscape below him blurring into a mix of brown fields and blue skies. Whatever this was, Malik knew it was something he couldn't ignore. His system had saved thousands already, but if something went wrong, everything could unravel in an instant. The flight back to Briar Ridge was a blur. As Malik sat in his seat, the hum of the airplane and the chatter of the other passengers were lost to him. All he could think about was the call from Jeremiah. Something had gone wrong with the system. The very thing he had poured his heart and soul into was now showing signs of failure. It was the last thing he'd expected after all the progress they'd made, and yet it felt inevitable. He had always known that technology, no matter how advanced, was a delicate balance. One wrong shift, one misstep, and it could all come crashing down. As the plane descended toward the small regional airport near Briar Ridge, Malik's thoughts raced. What could have gone wrong? Was it a bug in the software? A malfunction in one of the sensors? Or was it something more serious, a flaw in the system's very design that no one had seen coming? He stepped off the plane, his boots hitting the tarmac with a sharp, rhythmic echo. His mind was already 2 steps ahead as he made his way to the parking lot, where Jeremiah was waiting for him. The old friend's face was taut with worry, and Malik could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him even before he said a word. "Malik," Jeremiah said, his voice tense. "It's bad. The system's malfunctioning in several areas. We're getting false readings. In some parts of the county, it's showing extreme risk where there's none, and in other areas, it's not showing enough. People are getting evacuation orders that they don't need, while others aren't getting warnings at all." Malik felt his heart skip a beat. This wasn't just a glitch. It was chaos. People could be hurt. Lives were at risk. "Where exactly is it happening?" Malik asked, his voice steady despite the storm of panic building inside him. "Everywhere," Jeremiah said, his frustration evident. "The readings are erratic, it's like the system is losing its ability to interpret the data properly. It was fine yesterday, but this morning, it just changed. It's happening in all the regions we've implemented Fireson and Flowson in, but it's most noticeable here in Briar Ridge. We've had a couple of near-miss situations already." Malik clenched his fists. His mind was already running through all the possibilities. There had to be something that could explain this, something that they could fix. They couldn't afford to let the system fail now, not when they were on the verge of something so much bigger. Not when the whole country was starting to depend on it. "Let's head back to the base," Malik said, already walking toward the car. "We need to look at the data. We need to figure out what's going on before this gets any worse." Back at the lab, the team had already gathered, but the air was thick with tension. Sam, the lead engineer, was furiously typing on his laptop, her face pinched in concentration. She looked up as Malik walked in. "It's bad, Malik," she said quietly. "I don't even know how to explain it. The sensors are giving conflicting data. The models we built, they're not holding up." Malik moved to the center of the room, his mind focused. He knew Sam well enough to understand that she wouldn't be throwing words around unless it was truly catastrophic. This wasn't just a hiccup. This was a fundamental failure in the system's core. "Walk me through it," Malik said, his voice calm despite the turmoil inside. "What's happening exactly?" Sam pointed to the large screen in the center of the room, which displayed the real-time data from the system. "We've got the Fireson sensors showing extreme heat indices in areas where it's only in the low 80s. And Flowson, those flood alerts, it's showing warnings in areas where no rain has even fallen. People in the city are evacuating, and no one knows why. Meanwhile, there are places at real risk that aren't getting any warnings." Malik stepped closer to the screen, his mind racing through the possibilities. Something was interfering with the algorithms. Something had corrupted the data flow. "Is it a sensor malfunction?" he asked, his voice low. "No," Sam said, shaking her head. "The sensors are fine. The problem is in the data processing. We're missing something, Malik. The system is overcompensating. It's trying to adapt too quickly to the fluctuations in climate data, but it's not doing it right. It's reacting without properly analyzing." Malik leaned against the desk, his thoughts churning. This was a nightmare. This was exactly the kind of failure he had feared, the kind that would make everyone question whether his technology was worth the risk. He ran a hand through his hair. "Can we fix it?" "We have to fix it," Sam said, a fire in her eyes. "I'm not giving up on this. We just need to rework the algorithm's feedback loop, make sure it can handle data volatility without overreacting. But we're going to need a lot of resources, and fast." Malik looked at the team around him, Jeremiah, Sam, and the others who had believed in him from the start. They had come so far, but now the real test was here. He couldn't afford to fail. Not now. "All right," Malik said, his voice firm with resolve. We'll stay here tonight. Get everything we need, laptops, data models, whatever you can think of. I'll be in touch with Castillo. I'm going to need his help to deploy a nationwide update if we're going to fix this. Jeremiah stepped forward. I'll keep an eye on the communications. We'll need to be transparent with everyone. People are already asking questions. If we don't get ahead of this, it'll turn into a public relations nightmare. Malik nodded. The clock was ticking. Every second they wasted could mean more confusion, more panic. He couldn't afford to let it spiral. Hours later, as the team worked feverishly through the night, Malik stood in the corner of the room, looking at the screen. The updates were coming in slowly, but the adjustments they were making were beginning to show results. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but the alerts were starting to stabilize. The flood zones were matching the weather patterns again. The heat index was more in line with reality. But there was no denying it, they were running out of time. Malik pulled out his phone and dialed Castillo's number. The line rang twice before the familiar voice picked up. Malik, Castillo said, sounding concerned. I've been getting reports from the field. What's going on with the system? Malik's voice was calm, but his mind was racing. We've got a problem. A major malfunction. It's affecting the data processing, false readings, incorrect alerts. People are panicking. I need your team's help to push out a nationwide patch as soon as possible. Castillo was silent for a moment. How long do you need? We're working on it right now, but we'll need at least 12 hours to stabilize the system and roll out the fix. All right, Castillo said, his tone shifting to business mode. I'll get the ball rolling on our end. We'll support you. Just keep me updated. Malik hung up, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. It was a race against time. But he wasn't backing down. This system wasn't just his legacy, it was a lifeline. He couldn't let it fail. Malik sat at the head of the table, the weight of the world pressing down on him as the team worked tirelessly to resolve the malfunction. The flickering screens reflected the exhaustion etched on every face in the room. It had been 24 hours since they'd first discovered the issues with the system, and despite their best efforts, they had yet to stabilize the alerts. The data wasn't just incorrect anymore, it was almost unpredictable. Every time they thought they'd solved one problem, another popped up. A flood zone warning would clear, only to be replaced by an erroneous heatwave alert in a completely different region. The systems were essentially locked in a feedback loop, caught between real-time data and an overcorrection that kept generating false alarms. Malik rubbed his temples, exhaustion settling in deeper. How had it come to this? This was the moment, the one that would either define his career or destroy everything he'd worked for. The partnership with the California Climate Action Fund was at risk. The credibility of the system was on the line. The more he thought about it, the more Malik realized just how far-reaching the impact of the failure could be. If they didn't fix this soon, it wouldn't just be Briar Ridge or California affected, it would be the entire country. Every disaster zone across the United States would be misinformed, and lives could be lost. Malik, Sam's voice cut through his thoughts. She was standing at the monitor, her brow furrowed, scanning the incoming data. I think I might know what's happening. Malik looked up, his heart racing with a mix of hope and desperation. What is it? Sam took a deep breath, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she navigated through the layers of data. I think we've been looking at it all wrong. It's not the sensors malfunctioning, it's not the weather patterns, and it's not even the algorithms. It's the integration, how the different systems within Fireson and Flowson are communicating with each other. Malik stood up and walked over to her. What do you mean? Sam paused for a moment, her fingers hovering over the keys as she double-checked the information on the screen. It's the way we've designed the feedback loops between Fireson and Flowson. They're supposed to work together to predict and mitigate risks, right? But there's a delay in the data transfer between the two systems. When one system sends out an alert, the other system takes too long to adjust. So we're getting double alerts or conflicting signals in the same region. Malik's mind raced as the pieces clicked together. So, the systems aren't coordinating properly? Exactly, Sam confirmed. The algorithms are trying to adjust based on real-time weather data, but the delay between the two systems is creating a kind of chaos. It's amplifying the errors rather than correcting them. Malik felt a surge of both relief and frustration. This was fixable, it had to be, but it would take time. And time was something they didn't have. People were already getting false warnings, evacuating homes for no reason, while others were staying put when they should have been getting out. The longer they took, the more the system's credibility would erode. We need to fix the communication delay, Malik said, his voice sharp and determined. Sam, how long would it take to rework the integration? Sam didn't hesitate. If we re-engineer the feedback loop and streamline the data transfer, we can get it fixed in a few hours. But it's going to require us to reboot the system nationwide, and that's going to mean some downtime. We'll need to coordinate with the government, with FEMA, and with local officials to make sure they understand what's going on. Malik nodded. Do it. Whatever it takes. I'll handle the communications on my end. Sam got to work immediately, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she began to rewrite the algorithms. Meanwhile, Malik picked up his phone and dialed Castillo's number. He needed to inform the California Climate Action Fund of what was going on, and fast. It rang twice before Castillo picked up. Malik, Castillo said, his voice strained. We've been getting calls all day. This thing's getting out of hand. What's going on? Malik took a deep breath. We've found the problem. It's not a sensor failure, it's an issue with the integration between Fireson and Flowson. The systems are miscommunicating, which is causing the conflicting alerts. We're reworking the feedback loop to correct the issue, but it's going to take a few hours. During that time, we'll need to pull the system offline temporarily. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Malik could hear Castillo's breath steadying as he processed the information. Understood, Castillo said finally. How long do you need? 2 to 3 hours to fix it, Malik replied. After that, we'll need to roll out a nationwide update. I'll keep you posted on the progress. All right. Keep me updated. I'll get FEMA on the line. We'll coordinate from our side, but make sure you're transparent with the public. We can't afford another round of panic. I know, Malik said, his voice tight. We're on it. Malik hung up and turned to the rest of the team. We're going offline for the next few hours. Sam, keep me posted on the progress. Everyone else, let's coordinate with local officials and get the word out. We can't let this escalate further. The next few hours felt like a blur. Malik and the team worked in overdrive, pushing through the final tweaks to the algorithms. Sam was the driving force, her expertise guiding them through each change. As the final adjustments were made, Malik felt a small sense of relief, but he knew the hardest part was still ahead, the public response. He knew that once the system went back online, the world would be watching. The eyes of the nation were on him, on the project that had promised to revolutionize disaster management. But that promise was now tarnished. He couldn't afford to let the public lose confidence in the system. If they did, the whole thing would crumble. The future of climate response, of disaster mitigation, was riding on these next few hours. With the system ready for a reboot, Malik took a deep breath and turned to his team. All right, let's do this. We've got one shot at getting this right. Hours later, as the reboot completed and the system began coming back online, Malik's phone rang again. It was Castillo. It's time, Castillo said, his voice steady. We've got the press on standby. We're rolling out the update. Malik closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of it all. Let's make it count. As the system began to stabilize, the team monitored the incoming data with bated breath. Slowly but surely, the alerts began to normalize. The feedback loops were working again, and the false readings began to dissipate. Malik could see the first glimmers of hope. They had done it. They had fixed it. But even as the system came back online, Malik knew that the real work was just beginning. The nation would need answers. They would need assurance that this failure wouldn't happen again. And that, Malik knew, was going to take more than just technology. It was going to take trust. The first thing Malik did when the system came back online was look at the data. For the first time in what felt like forever, he saw green. The alerts had returned to normal. The feedback loop was functioning as it should, and the false readings that had plagued them were gone. But despite the relief he felt, there was no time to celebrate. They had fixed the system, yes, but they hadn't fixed the damage done. The call had already come in from FEMA, and the press was on standby. Malik had expected this moment, but that didn't make it any easier. The nationwide news channels were already abuzz with reports of the malfunction, and social media was filled with angry comments from people who had received false alarms. Malik wasn't worried about the technical side of things anymore. That part had been handled. What concerned him now was how to rebuild the public's trust that had been shattered in a matter of hours. Trust that his technology, once the shining beacon of innovation, had failed them when they needed it most. He stood up from his desk and walked over to the window, looking out over the quiet streets of Briar Ridge. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden hue over the town, but Malik could only focus on the weight of the task ahead. How do you rebuild something that had collapsed so suddenly? Jeremiah entered the room, his face drawn but determined. It's time, he said, his voice steady. They're ready for you. Malik nodded. Let's do this. The press conference was held in the small conference room at the local government building, but it might as well have been a stage set for the most intense performance of his life. The room was packed with reporters, their cameras trained on him as he took his place behind the podium. The air was thick with anticipation. He could feel the weight of their eyes, the judgment behind every lens, every click of the camera. Malik took a deep breath before speaking, the words rehearsed in his mind but still heavy in his chest. Good evening. I want to start by addressing the issue head-on. Yesterday, we experienced a malfunction with the Fireson and Floson systems. These systems are designed to save lives by providing real-time alerts to emergency responders, helping communities prepare for disaster. Yesterday, that system failed. There was a collective shift in the room, and Malik could feel the tension tighten. He knew this was the critical moment. The audience was waiting for him to either redeem himself or let it all slip away. Let me be clear, Malik continued, his voice strong. We take full responsibility for the failure. We didn't just let down the people of Briar Ridge, or California, we let down the entire country. And for that, I am deeply sorry. But I am also here to tell you that we have fixed the problem. The systems are back online, and the issues that caused the false readings have been addressed. A reporter raised their hand, and Malik gestured for them to speak. Mr. Malik, the reporter began, you're telling us that the system is fixed, but how can we trust it again? Thousands of people were evacuated needlessly, while other people were left in danger. What guarantees do we have that this won't happen again? Malik took a moment to collect his thoughts. He had expected this question, and he knew it was coming. The public wanted answers, real answers, not just promises. I understand your concern, Malik said, his tone firm but sincere. The trust of the people is something we can never take for granted. The malfunction that occurred was the result of an issue with how the two systems communicated with each other, and we have reworked the integration to ensure it doesn't happen again. We've also put in place additional checks to monitor for any discrepancies, so that if something similar were to happen, we would catch it before it affects the public. Malik paused, looking directly into the eyes of the reporters. But it's not just about the technology. It's about accountability. We've learned a hard lesson, and we will be transparent with you every step of the way moving forward. We owe you that. He could feel the weight of the silence in the room. The reporters were listening. They were skeptical, yes, but they were listening. And that, Malik thought, was a small victory. "Mr. Malik," another reporter asked, "what's next for your company? After this failure, how do you plan to regain public confidence in Fyerson and Flowson?" Malik took a deep breath. This was the question that would define the rest of his career. "We're committed to rebuilding the trust we've lost. We are implementing a nationwide outreach program to ensure that communities are informed, educated, and involved in the process. We'll be holding public meetings, offering full transparency on the fixes we've made, and making sure that we listen to the feedback from the people who depend on our systems the most. This is not just a technical fix. It's a commitment to the people." Another reporter chimed in, "What about the partnerships with local governments and emergency services? Will they be continuing?" Malik nodded. "Absolutely. We're already in discussions with FEMA, state emergency response teams, and local authorities to ensure that we have their full support moving forward. We can't do this alone. This is about working together to build a safer, more reliable system." The questions continued for what felt like hours, but Malik felt himself growing more confident with each response. He didn't have all the answers, and he knew the road ahead would be difficult, but this was his moment to show that he wasn't going to back down. That he was going to keep pushing forward, no matter how hard it got. By the time the press conference was over, Malik was drained. His shoulders ached from the weight of the questions, but he knew he had done what he could. Now, it was time to follow through. Later that evening, as Malik sat in his office, he received a call from Castillo. "Malik," Castillo said, his voice warm but still carrying the weight of the situation, "I just wanted to say, well done. You handled yourself well today." Malik leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "Thanks, Castillo. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. We've got a lot of work to do." "I know," Castillo replied. "But you've got something most people don't have, resilience. People respect that. You'll get through this." Malik smiled faintly. "Let's hope so. I've got a lot of trust to rebuild." The days following the press conference were filled with more meetings, more outreach, and more work to stabilize the system. But Malik could feel a shift. The public wasn't angry anymore. They were curious. They wanted to know what had happened, how it had been fixed, and what the future held. And slowly, piece by piece, they were beginning to trust him again. It wasn't going to happen overnight, Malik knew. But he was ready for the challenge. He had always known that true progress didn't come without its setbacks. And he wasn't about to let this one stop him from achieving the vision he had for Fyerson and Flowson. As the weeks passed and the system proved to be more reliable, Malik began to see the shift in the public's perception. The partnerships with local governments were strengthening, and his team was back on track, more motivated than ever. The road to redemption was long, but Malik was ready for it. He knew now that the real test wasn't just about the technology. It was about building something that people could trust, something that would stand the test of time. And that, Malik realized, was worth every challenge along the way. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. After the press conference, Malik and his team worked non-stop to ensure that Fyerson and Flowson were not only operating smoothly but also transparent in every step of the recovery process. The public's faith in the system was being restored, but Malik knew that restoring their faith in him, in his leadership, would take longer. There were no more false alarms, no more glitches. The feedback loops between the systems were operating flawlessly, and the data was more accurate than ever. Still, Malik wasn't resting easy. There was a looming question that he couldn't shake: how could they prevent something like this from ever happening again? And how could he ensure that the people, the agencies, and the local governments who relied on Fyerson and Flowson never doubted him again? The answer, he decided, lay in partnerships. The morning after a particularly long night of code rewrites and data optimization, Malik found himself walking through the entrance of the California Climate Action Fund's office. It was time to meet with the people who had been a crucial part of his journey so far, and a part of him still wasn't sure what kind of reception he would get. Yes, they had agreed to continue the partnership after the system's failure, but the true test would come in these next few conversations. If he could secure these relationships, he would be able to weather any future storm. "Mr. Malik, it's good to see you again," said Clara Ramirez, the director of the California Climate Action Fund, as she greeted him at the door. Her voice was warm, but her eyes betrayed the caution she felt. She had been there when Malik presented the initial pitch for the climate disaster response systems. She had seen the potential in the technology, but she had also been one of the first to express concern after the malfunction. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me, Clara," Malik said, extending his hand. "I know it's been a rough few weeks, but I wanted to come by and make sure we're on the same page moving forward." Clara smiled faintly and motioned for him to follow her into the conference room. "I think that's a good idea. We've been working closely with FEMA and other agencies to ensure that people know we're still committed to these systems. But as you can imagine, there are still a lot of questions." Malik nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The partnership wasn't just about technology, it was about trust, about proving that they could make it through this together. "I'm ready to answer those questions," Malik said. As they settled into the conference room, Clara's assistant brought in coffee, and the two of them began discussing the details. Malik could sense that Clara was looking for reassurance, not just about the systems, but about the future of their collaboration. "I'll be honest with you, Malik," Clara began, her voice measured. "The people who rely on Fireson and Floson are still hesitant. After everything that happened, they're not sure if they can count on your system for the long haul. And that's not just a local problem, it's nationwide." Malik leaned forward, focusing intently on Clara. "I understand. And I know this isn't going to be easy. We've put a lot of work into fixing the systems, but I know that's not enough. We need to prove that we can deliver on our promise to protect lives. That means showing that we can adapt, learn from our mistakes, and keep improving. We're not just asking for forgiveness, we're asking for the opportunity to prove ourselves again." Clara seemed to consider his words for a moment. "And what do you propose to do that?" "I think it's time to build new partnerships," Malik said. "We've learned a lot from this failure. And one of the key lessons is that we can't do this alone. We need a network of people and organizations that are just as committed to public safety as we are. The more we collaborate, the more resilient our system will be." Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was curiosity there, too. "How do you plan to build these partnerships?" "We're already working on a nationwide outreach program," Malik explained. "We'll be engaging with local governments, emergency response teams, and community organizations to ensure they are directly involved in how we improve our system. But I also think we need to go further. I want to partner with other tech companies, academic institutions, and climate experts to enhance the forecasting models and improve real-time data analysis. Together, we can create a more integrated and resilient response to climate disasters." Clara seemed to soften at the mention of collaboration. She had always been an advocate for bringing different sectors together to tackle climate issues. "That's a bold approach. But I'll be honest, Malik, it's going to take time. And a lot of money. We need the right partners on board, and we need to know that you're committed to making this work for the long haul." Malik nodded. "We've already secured funding from a few investors who are just as committed to this cause as we are. But I need your help to build the right partnerships. This isn't just about us getting back on track, it's about creating something that will be able to scale and adapt to the growing challenges we'll face in the future. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen." Clara seemed to consider this for a moment before speaking again. "All right, Malik. I'll help you. But we need to get started right away. We'll connect you with some of the right people, others in the tech community, in government, and I want you to focus on one thing, building trust. No more broken promises. No more delays. Just results." Malik's heart lifted. You have my word, Clara. We'll make this right. As Malik walked out of the California Climate Action Fund's office, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had gained their support, but more importantly, he had gained Clara's trust. She had given him a path forward, and now it was up to him to walk it. Over the next few weeks, Malik and his team began forming new partnerships, reaching out to tech companies, universities, and government agencies. They even held a series of town halls across the country, inviting people from different communities to share their experiences and suggestions for improving the systems. Malik knew that the road ahead was going to be long, but this was the only way to ensure that the technology would not only be reliable but trusted. Every partnership they forged brought new opportunities and insights, and slowly, Malik began to see the foundations of a more robust, resilient disaster response network being built. The feedback from local governments was positive, and even FEMA was beginning to take a more active role in the process. But it wasn't just the partnerships that were making the difference. It was the shift in perspective. Malik and his team were no longer simply focused on technology. They were focused on people. The work had become about more than just coding, algorithms, and sensors. It had become about the communities they were serving, about real lives affected by the climate disasters they were trying to prevent. And Malik, in the quiet moments of reflection, realized that he had changed, too. He had started this journey as an engineer with a vision, but now, he was a leader with a purpose. And that purpose was more than just fixing a broken system, it was about building something that could stand the test of time, something that would help people no matter where they lived. The sound of a ringing phone broke through the silence of Malik's office. He had been staring at his computer screen for what felt like hours, scanning through the latest set of data reports. His mind had wandered in the direction of progress, how the partnerships were finally taking shape, how the system was being tested and refined, but there was still a sense of unease deep down. The journey ahead was not without its obstacles, and Malik knew all too well that any moment could introduce a new challenge. "Malik," came a familiar voice on the other end of the line. It was Castillo. Malik immediately straightened in his chair, knowing that whatever was coming next, it was likely important. "What's going on?" Malik asked, already bracing himself. "I think you should sit down for this one," Castillo replied. There was an edge to his voice that Malik didn't like. "I just got off the phone with FEMA, and they've raised some concerns. It's not about the system anymore, Malik. It's about the climate patterns." Malik's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "The storm predictions," Castillo continued. "There's been a sudden shift in the patterns. Climate scientists are saying we could be looking at a much worse hurricane season than we initially anticipated. The models we've been using are outdated, and FEMA believes our system might not be able to handle the scale of what's coming." Malik felt his blood run cold. The Fireson and Floson systems were built to handle a wide range of natural disasters, but this was different. A change in climate patterns meant that even the most sophisticated systems could become obsolete if they couldn't adapt quickly enough. "I'm going to need to meet with FEMA," Malik said, his mind racing. "How soon can we set it up?" "Now. I've already arranged a call." "Get ready," Castillo replied. Within the hour, Malik was sitting at the conference table in his office, his laptop open and his notes in front of him. The virtual meeting with FEMA's top officials started promptly, and the moment they appeared on the screen, Malik could tell they weren't wasting any time. "Mr. Malik," began a stern-looking man in his 50s, wearing a suit that screamed authority. "Thank you for joining us. I'll get straight to the point. The models we've been working with show an alarming increase in the intensity of storms. The systems you've developed, while innovative, aren't equipped to handle this new reality. We're facing storms that could be twice as severe as what we've seen in the past decade. If Fireson and Floson are to remain relevant, they need to adapt, and they need to do so quickly." Malik's heart sank. He had been anticipating challenges in the wake of the malfunction, but this was a new level of complexity. Adapting to more intense storms wasn't just about tweaking the algorithms, it was about rethinking the very foundation of the technology. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Malik said, trying to maintain composure. I understand the gravity of the situation. But I need more information. What exactly are you seeing in these new models that would push our systems to their limits? The FEMA official, whose name Malik had learned was Director Thomas, clicked a few buttons on his computer, and a new set of charts appeared on the screen. The projections were staggering: hurricanes with wind speeds that could reach unheard-of levels, flooding that could devastate entire communities, and rapid shifts in climate zones that were almost impossible to predict with the old models. These new patterns don't just represent an increase in frequency, Director Thomas explained. We're seeing unpredictable storms in regions that weren't previously considered at high risk. And with the severity of the storms growing, we need a system that can not only forecast but also provide real-time response options, something that can anticipate the unpredictability of the new climate we're facing. Malik processed the information in silence. This was a monumental shift. If they didn't act quickly, the technology that had taken years to develop might no longer be enough. They had been working to save lives, but now, they were racing against time to keep up with the rapidly changing environment. We can make adjustments, Malik said, his voice steady. We've been working on predictive models already, but we will need to upgrade them and expand our data sources. I'll get our team on this right away. We'll need to integrate more climate data from satellite systems and partner with new sources of meteorological information. But we also need more computational power. The current infrastructure we have won't be able to handle the kind of storms you're describing. Director Thomas nodded. We understand. FEMA is prepared to work with you on securing the resources needed for this upgrade, but we need concrete results. The people who depend on Fireson and Floson cannot afford another failure. The public is already skeptical. You need to deliver, and you need to deliver fast. Malik's mind was already racing ahead. He had to move quickly, but there was a part of him that wasn't just worried about the systems failing again. The weight of the expectations, the pressure to deliver something that could withstand the chaos of these new storms, it was enormous. I understand the urgency, Malik replied. We'll begin scaling up immediately. But we need full collaboration with climate experts, tech partners, and the government. We're talking about a complete overhaul in how we approach forecasting and disaster response. Director Thomas leaned forward, his gaze intense. Good. But I want results in 6 months, Malik. Not 6 years. If you can't prove that your system is adaptable enough to handle this new reality, we'll be forced to look at other options. It's a hard truth, but it's the reality we're facing. Malik didn't flinch. He knew what was at stake. 6 months. I'll make it happen. After the call ended, Malik sat back in his chair, staring at the screen in front of him. The data from FEMA still lingered in his mind. His team had made incredible progress, but the task ahead was unlike anything they had faced before. 6 months, he whispered to himself. He leaned forward and immediately started making a list, step-by-step actions they would need to take. There was no time to waste. First, they would need to reach out to their climate science partners to begin revising their models. Second, they would need to secure additional resources, computational power, data storage, and hardware that could keep up with the demands. Third, they would need to expand their partnerships with emergency response teams to ensure that the system could be used in real time with the new data inputs. The next few months would be a race against time, but Malik was ready. He had no other choice. This new challenge was daunting, but it also reignited something inside him, the drive to prove that they could not only survive the storm but outlast it. Later that night, Malik sat in his living room, the lights dimmed, and his laptop still open in front of him. His thoughts kept returning to the meeting with FEMA. The intensity of the storm projections, the pressure to adapt, it was overwhelming. But through it all, one thought remained clear: this was why he had started this journey in the first place. To make a real difference. To save lives. He couldn't back down now. As he closed his laptop and stood up to stretch, he felt a renewed sense of determination. He had 6 months to make the world believe in his vision again. And Malik wasn't about to waste a single second. The next few days felt like a blur. Malik and his team were working round the clock, strategizing how they could meet FEMA's aggressive 6-month deadline. They'd been given a lifeline, a chance to prove that Fireson and Flossen were more than just a good idea, that they could truly adapt and rise to the occasion. But the clock was ticking, and the weight of the task at hand was starting to feel heavier than ever. Malik's team had already started making adjustments to the system's algorithms, but they quickly realized the scope of the problem was far greater than they had initially anticipated. As they dug deeper into the new climate data provided by FEMA and their climate science partners, it became clear that the shift in weather patterns wasn't just an anomaly, it was the beginning of a new era of unpredictable, high-intensity storms that could radically change the way they needed to forecast and respond. "We need to rethink everything," Malik said to his lead engineer, Jamal, as they pored over the latest models in the war room. "This isn't just about adding a few more data points. This is about building a whole new foundation for how we interpret climate behavior. These storms aren't just stronger, they're different." Jamal nodded, his brow furrowed. "The models we've been working with can't predict the speed or the paths of these storms with the accuracy we need. We're going to need far more advanced simulations, something that can process real-time data from the field as the storms are forming." Malik stood up and started pacing, his mind racing with possibilities. They needed better models, faster processing power, and most importantly, the ability to act in real time. The stakes were higher than ever before. If they failed now, the consequences wouldn't just be professional, lives would be lost. "There's one thing we know for sure," Malik said, turning to face the team. "We can't keep doing this alone. We need more resources. And we need help from people who understand this new climate better than we do." He picked up his phone and sent a text to Clara Ramirez at the California Climate Action Fund. They had worked together before, but this new challenge required more than just collaboration, it required a massive, coordinated effort. Clara had always been an advocate for pooling resources, and Malik needed her expertise and influence now more than ever. The next day, Clara responded quickly, inviting Malik to a meeting at her office to discuss the project. Malik arrived early, his mind focused on the task at hand. He couldn't afford to waste any time. When he walked into her office, Clara was already waiting, seated at her desk. Her face was serious, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "What's going on, Malik?" she asked, without wasting any time. "What did FEMA say?" Malik took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "It's worse than we thought. The storm projections are off the charts, and we're being asked to adjust our systems to handle a whole new scale of unpredictability. We're talking about storms that could devastate entire states in a matter of hours. We need to rethink the way we're processing climate data, and fast. But it's going to take more resources than we have right now." Clara leaned back in her chair, absorbing the gravity of the situation. "I've seen those projections. This is a serious challenge. What exactly are you asking for?" "We need to bring in more people, more experts, more tech companies, and universities that specialize in climate science. We need the latest supercomputing power to run simulations faster and with more precision. And we need funding to make this happen quickly. We have 6 months, Clara. 6 months to adapt or fail." Clara nodded, her expression firming. "You're right. The clock is ticking. But I want you to know something, Malik. The California Climate Action Fund is fully behind you. We've already reached out to some of our partners in the tech industry, and I've got a few calls set up with government officials to secure additional funding. We'll get you what you need, but you're going to have to move fast. No one has ever attempted to do something like this in this short of a time frame." Malik's eyes lit up with a renewed sense of hope. "Thank you, Clara. We'll make it work. But it's not just about money, it's about collaboration. We need everyone on board, from local governments to climate researchers to engineers. We need to create a network of expertise that will allow us to build these new models and test them as quickly as possible. Clara stood up from her desk and walked over to the window, looking out at the city. "All right," she said, her tone resolute. "We're in this together, Malik. I'll help you make the connections you need. Let's start making some calls and building the right team." By the end of the week, Malik had assembled a team of experts from every corner of the climate science and tech industries. He had engineers who specialized in real-time data analysis, meteorologists with decades of experience tracking storms, and climate scientists who were able to bring cutting-edge research to the table. But Malik knew that they couldn't just rely on their individual expertise. They needed a cohesive, unified approach to solve the problem. They set up a temporary command center in a building downtown, with rows of computers and whiteboards covered in complex equations and diagrams. It was a far cry from the comfortable, controlled environment Malik had envisioned when he first started Fireson and Flowson. This wasn't just about innovative technology, it was about collaboration on a scale he hadn't imagined. It was about pooling all their resources, knowledge, and skills to make something extraordinary happen in the shortest amount of time possible. "We're going to have to build this on the fly," Malik said during the first full team meeting. "The simulations will need to run constantly, giving us live data on storm formation, wind speed, and other environmental factors. But the real challenge is going to be how we process that data in real time and get it to the right people on the ground. We need to update our predictive models as quickly as the storms are changing. We're going to need supercomputing power for that," said Natalie, one of the data engineers. "Even with the most advanced algorithms, the speed of processing will be our biggest bottleneck. If we don't get access to faster systems, this could be the thing that stops us from keeping up with the storms." Malik nodded. "We're already in talks with a few tech companies. I'm confident we'll get the resources we need. But we also need to have the systems in place to share the data immediately with FEMA and local governments. We can't afford delays." The next few days were spent in non-stop brainstorming sessions and coding marathons. The team worked tirelessly, refining the system's ability to predict not only the trajectory of storms but also their intensity. They introduced new layers of data into the model, integrating satellite imagery, ocean temperatures, and real-time measurements of wind speeds taken from field sensors that were scattered throughout vulnerable regions. Malik didn't leave the office for days. He slept in short bursts on the couch in the corner of the command center, waking up to dive straight back into work. His only respite came from quick calls with Clara, who was providing support on the funding side, and Jamal, who was leading the development of the new predictive models. The pressure mounted with each passing day. Every moment felt critical. And as the storms in the Atlantic began to shift from mere forecasts to tangible threats, Malik knew they were racing against more than just the clock, they were racing against nature itself. The sky over New Jersey darkened in the blink of an eye. The first few warnings had come through days ago, a distant rumble of thunderstorms quickly escalating into something more severe. But nothing had prepared Malik or his team for the sheer ferocity of the storm that was now racing toward the eastern seaboard. For the past few weeks, Malik had been glued to his laptop, monitoring the development of the storm patterns as they progressed from tropical disturbances to a full-blown Category 5 hurricane. His systems had been running simulations non-stop, crunching numbers and predicting the storm's every move. But the data was unsettling. It was one thing to predict where a storm might land, but quite another to predict its intensity, speed, and the myriad of variables that could change in the blink of an eye. "We've got a problem," Jamal said, his voice strained as he looked at the latest data streaming across the screen. The wind speeds were now clocking in at 190 miles per hour. "It's shifting too quickly. The models we've been using can't keep up with it. This isn't just another storm, it's a game changer." Malik's heart skipped a beat as he stared at the screen. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. The storm was no longer just a forecast, it was real, and it was bearing down on them. They had 6 months to prove that their system could adapt to the unpredictable nature of these new storms, but they were out of time. "What's the latest?" Malik asked, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling in his mind. Jamal quickly ran through the updates. It's moving faster than expected, and we've got new data from the field showing that it's creating unprecedented storm surges along the coast. FEMA's going to need our system to provide real-time updates on wind speed, flooding potential, and evacuation paths. But we need to update the models. This storm is way outside the range of what we've tested. Malik felt his pulse quicken. This was exactly what they had feared. The system's ability to handle unpredictable, extreme events was being put to the ultimate test. But failure wasn't an option. Not now. Get FEMA on the line, Malik said, already standing up and moving toward his desk. We can't waste any time. FEMA's operations center was already overwhelmed. The storm had intensified so rapidly that the agency's response was struggling to keep up. Malik could hear the frantic voices of officials on the other end of the call, their words clipped and tense. Malik, we're tracking it too. But this is bigger than anything we've seen in decades. We need your system to help us predict real-time storm surge and flooding potential. We need evacuation routes. We need to know exactly when and where to deploy rescue teams. Malik's mind was a blur of thoughts, but he focused. This was the critical moment. His team had worked tirelessly, pouring their hearts into the algorithms and predictive models, but now it was about to come down to a test of speed, precision, and adaptability. We're already updating the models, Malik assured them. We've got new data coming in every minute, and we're working on adjusting our predictions in real time. I'll send you an update in the next few minutes. But keep the communication lines open. We'll need constant feedback as this storm intensifies. We'll be ready, the FEMA official replied, his voice tight with urgency. But I can't stress enough, lives depend on your system. Don't let us down. The call ended, and Malik turned to face his team, who were watching him with a mixture of anxiety and determination. They had trained for moments like this, but the reality was much more intense than anyone had imagined. We're not going to let anyone down, Malik said, his voice resolute. We've prepared for this. Now it's time to execute. I need everyone on high alert. Let's get this storm mapped out and give FEMA the real-time data they need. Jamal was already coordinating with the data team to implement the latest adjustments to the system. The storm's unpredictability meant that every data point had to be processed as quickly as possible, with adjustments made in real time to ensure the predictions were accurate and up-to-date. They needed to get the storm surge data, wind speed forecasts, and evacuation routes mapped and sent to FEMA within the next few minutes. The atmosphere in the room was charged with energy. The team had always been good under pressure, but this was different. The stakes were higher, and the lives of thousands of people hung in the balance. Malik felt the weight of that responsibility pressing down on him. As the hours passed, the storm moved closer. The systems were running at full capacity, with the team furiously updating and refining the models. They could see the storm's trajectory shifting as it approached the coast, with landfall predicted in a few short hours. Malik watched the data feed, unable to tear his eyes away from the constant stream of updates. Every minute mattered. Suddenly, Jamal's voice broke through the silence. Malik, we've got a problem. Malik's stomach dropped. What is it? We've just received satellite data that shows the storm has intensified again, by 15 miles per hour, Jamal said. We need to recalibrate the models again. If we don't, we could be overestimating the evacuation routes and leaving people in danger. Malik nodded, keeping his composure. Recalibrate the models. I'll contact FEMA and update them immediately. His heart pounded as he dialed the FEMA operations center again. He could hear the chaos in the background, people shouting instructions, phones ringing off the hook. The urgency of the situation was palpable. We've got an update, Malik said, trying to keep his voice calm. The storm has picked up speed again. We need to adjust the evacuation routes and surge predictions. The models are being recalibrated right now. We'll send you the updated data in the next 10 minutes. 10 minutes. The FEMA official's voice was strained. We're already working on evacuations. Get us that data as soon as possible, or we won't be able to act in time. Malik felt a tight knot in his chest. He could hear the desperation in the man's voice. There was no time to second-guess themselves now. They had to get this right. The storm reached its peak intensity just as they finalized the updates. Malik watched the final model prediction pop up on the screen, a detailed map of the storm's path, wind speeds, and storm surges, along with an updated set of evacuation routes. The data was precise, the result of countless hours of work. He hit send, transmitting the information to FEMA. It felt like an eternity before they received a response. "We've got it," came the voice on the other end of the call. "The updated data is perfect. It's allowing us to make real-time decisions on evacuations and rescue efforts. We've got teams on the ground, and we're executing the plan as we speak." Malik exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. It wasn't over yet, there was still so much to be done, but for the first time in hours, he allowed himself to feel a brief moment of triumph. The system had worked. They had adapted in real time, just as they had promised. And now, thousands of lives could be saved. "We did it," Jamal said, a tired but satisfied grin on his face. Malik looked around the room at his team. They were all exhausted, but there was a shared sense of accomplishment in the air. They had faced the storm head-on, and they had delivered. But Malik knew one thing for sure, this was just the beginning. The storm had passed, but there would be many more to come. And they would be ready. The storm had passed. For Malik and his team, it felt like they had just survived the ultimate test of their abilities, but the aftermath was only beginning. The systems they had put into place to track and predict the storm had been crucial, and the data they provided had saved thousands of lives. FEMA had praised their efforts, local governments had acknowledged their contributions, and the world was starting to see Fireson and Flosin as more than just innovative concepts, they were vital tools for the future of disaster management. But for Malik, the real work was just beginning. The storm was a turning point, not just for him and his team, but for the entire field of climate adaptation. It was clear now that the world had entered a new era, an era where storms like the one that had just passed would become the new normal. Climate change wasn't a distant threat anymore, it was here, and it was reshaping everything. The next few weeks were a blur. Malik barely had time to process the success of their real-time storm tracking before new challenges began to surface. Governments across the nation were reaching out, eager to incorporate Fireson and Flosin into their own disaster response frameworks. Corporations were investing in climate tech, seeing the potential in predictive models for supply chains, agriculture, and even retail. The demand for their systems had exploded. Malik sat in his office one afternoon, his mind swirling with new opportunities and partnerships. Clara had just called to update him on the funding they had secured from both private investors and federal sources. It was overwhelming, but exhilarating. "We've got a window here, Malik," Clara's voice came through the phone. "This is the chance to scale up. But we need to act fast. The longer you wait, the more competition will step in. We're talking about $1 billion market in climate adaptation tech." Malik leaned back in his chair, the weight of her words settling in. The storm had proven that their technology worked, but scaling it up to meet global demand was going to be a whole new challenge. They would need more engineers, more data scientists, and more infrastructure. But they also needed to build relationships with governments, communities, and even industries that had never considered the full impact of climate change until now. "It's a lot to take in," Malik admitted. "But it feels like we've only scratched the surface of what Fireson and Flosin can do. What's the next step?" "We've got to keep the momentum going," Clara said. "First, let's expand the team. We'll need a robust support structure to meet the demands of these partnerships. Then, we need to push the tech even further. Right now, you're predicting storms, but the real opportunity is in proactive measures, helping communities not just prepare, but also adapt before disaster strikes. Malik's mind began to race. He had always thought about disaster management as a reactive process, but what Clara was suggesting was revolutionary. What if they could shift the paradigm entirely, from reactive to proactive? What if they could give communities the tools to prevent some of the worst outcomes of climate change, rather than just responding after the fact? As the weeks turned into months, Malik and his team began refining their technology further. They implemented predictive models for long-term climate patterns, moving beyond just storms to include things like rising sea levels, heat waves, and even droughts. They incorporated data from all over the world, satellite feeds, sensor networks, and even community-generated data from local weather stations, to create a global climate response system that could be adapted for any region. Fireson and Flowson were evolving into much more than emergency tools. They were becoming an integral part of urban planning, agriculture, water management, and public health. Malik could see the future unfolding in front of him, a future where climate data wasn't just something you looked at after a disaster, but something you used to inform every decision, every policy, every life-saving action. It was a thrilling prospect, but it also came with immense pressure. Malik knew that they couldn't afford to fail, not now, not after all they had achieved. As their technology continued to expand, so did the stakes. Every new partnership, every new contract, brought new expectations. There were moments when Malik felt like he was being pulled in 100 different directions, trying to balance innovation with implementation, growth with sustainability. One evening, after a particularly intense board meeting, Malik found himself standing outside the office, looking out at the city skyline. He could see the distant glow of the lights, and for a moment, everything felt still. The weight of it all, of the lives saved, of the new opportunities on the horizon, of the responsibility to make the right choices, pressed on him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his reverie. It was a message from Jamal. "Hey, we're ready to test the next iteration of the predictive models. I think this one's going to change everything. Meet me at the lab when you can." Malik smiled to himself and typed back a quick reply, "On my way." As he walked into the lab, Malik was greeted by the buzz of activity. Engineers and data scientists were huddled around monitors, their faces lit up by the glow of the screens. Jamal waved him over, excitement in his eyes. "This is it, Malik," Jamal said. "We've integrated the new predictive algorithms with real-time environmental data and localized simulations. It's going to give us a whole new level of insight into how climate patterns evolve. We're no longer just responding to storms, we're predicting what's coming down the line in the next 5, 10, even 20 years." Malik couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he looked at the new system. It was more than just a tool, it was a vision of the future. It was a world where technology could help prevent disasters, where communities were no longer powerless in the face of climate change. As the data began to stream across the screen, Malik's mind raced with possibilities. The new system didn't just predict storms, it predicted shifts in weather patterns that could help cities plan for things like extreme heat, crop failures, and even water shortages. It was a comprehensive climate model that could help policymakers make informed, proactive decisions. "This," Malik said softly, "is a new era." Jamal looked up at him, his face beaming with pride. "We've only just begun." Malik looked around the lab at his team, the group of people who had been with him through it all. They had faced setbacks, long nights, and countless obstacles. But they had come through stronger, more determined. They had created something that had the potential to change the world. And Malik knew that they weren't done yet. As the sun set on another busy day, Malik stood once again by the window, reflecting on how far they had come. The world was changing, and they had the chance to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They had proven that innovation could overcome adversity, that technology could save lives, and that even in the face of unimaginable challenges, hope and progress could prevail. The journey had been long, but the future was bright. They were no longer just reacting to the world's problems, they were shaping a new one. And for Malik, that was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?